Okay, I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order for March 14th, and the purpose of this meeting is introduction of our proposed 2016 to 25-year financial plan. Could I have approval of the agenda? It's moved. Second? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The item of business now, number 3, we're going to have the Departmental Financial Plan presentations. And the first presentation will be for the financial services, and we'll go to Mr. Brent Blackhall for that.
Thank you, Chair. One thing maybe before we start, I could just run everyone through the financial plan as a whole, sort of. So if you, on the consolidated summary is on page 1. So that's the total picture of the funding sources and the expenditures. And then from that, we determine the municipal property taxes that are required. Okay. It's laid out a little different than previous years. I tried to just sort of simplify it a bit, so hopefully that helps. And you can see the total expenditures of 18.3 down the bottom, and then your total revenues, which includes the tax that would be needed to get to that total revenue number. And then down at the bottom, I put a recap of what that would mean compared to last year's tax numbers. So based on this plan as it stands right now, and I've got to talk about a few things in here, but it's 2.35% as it sits in this presentation. Okay. And then there's pages for each department. We've got a general government, which captures the CAO, the finance and IT, corporate services. And then we've got development services, which is engineering, planning, building inspection, GIS. That's Rob's big department. And then, of course, we have the sewer fund at the very back of this document. And Rob will speak to that later. And in the middle, you have your capital plan. So page 10 is a summary of all the capital expenditures that are planned from 2016 to 2020, and a recap of 2015 and 2015 actual. And then the pages with the real small print that are on the green small print pages, those are the actual items planned in each of those years. You have them on the big paper in your binders. You can pull them out and see the numbers without using your reading glasses. Okay, so that's kind of the plan in a nutshell.
You took the 2% out as well. You took the 2% out.
Yeah, I'll go with that. And yeah, just also some changes to how this plan has been done in the past. Is traditionally there had been a 2% inflation factor in all the years, so we've taken that out. And it's just really the plan is based on, if you look at 2015 actuals minus, some things that I'll have to go over and explain where you got one-off things. But really we look at our 2015 actuals and sort of you build that as your base, not the previous year's budgets where you may have, over budgeted, right? And then we also didn't, you don't need to factor in inflation every year if maybe you're not going to have it. And other areas where you know exactly what you're going to have, you build that into the numbers. Okay? So that's a change from the past. And so I'll go into the financial services area, and then we'll let the other directors do their areas. So on the general government services page, so page 2, you can see the council expenditures, and these are consistent with prior years. And there's a council contingency of $35,000 in the budget. Corporate services, Gabriel will speak to. Finance and IT, so that's my finance area and our IT, little IT shop we have. The professional development budget is to cover mandatory training required based on your professional designations and your like IT training for Mark as well. And there isn't a whole lot. We do the banking fees. Has a lot to do with there's like LTSA charges in there and stuff. Even it's called banking. It's not all banking, but it's done through EFT. So those are come under that banking category there. We always have a contingency in there for property tax adjustments. And last year we used a bit of it. So that's that area. There isn't really anything new going into it. It's not really an exciting area to speak to. And then we get into the common services areas, like the vehicles. That's really just vehicle maintenance. Again, nothing really new there. And again, we try to set the budget based on the actual expenditures that are incurring, not on budgets that have been brought forward in the past. And common services office. This is your basic office supplies and expenditures, telephone bills, equipment, photocopier leases, that kind of stuff, postage meters. There's a records management item in here that Gabriel will speak to. And our website maintenance. Now, software licensing looks like a large item on here, and that's our plan this year. We've got a SharePoint migration process that kind of started last year and is ongoing into the future years. And we've also got a Microsoft platform change coming to Office 365. Unfortunately, Mark isn't here tonight to speak to it all, but I do have his list of items here. There's also things in there like our ESRI fee. That's alone right there is $17,000 a year. Our asset management software is $11,000 a year. Okay, and then SharePoint and Tempest. Our Tempest fees, like $20,000 a year right there. So anyway, all those software costs add up to that 84. So and it changes every year a little bit here and there. And IT consulting and backup, that's the augmentation we have in place to provide some support for Mark. So when he's not here, and to have some backup person trained on our systems in case something happened to him. And we also have an additional amount in there to help produce some better reporting this year. So we've got a little bit of a contract amount in there. And that's mainly to do with getting some better budget to actual reporting out. So we can do that more on a monthly basis for you guys. Okay, and then we move into common services building, and this is really your building maintenance cost. Nothing too unusual in here. Your hydro, your water. The contracted maintenance includes the contract we have with the property manager, and also like the janitorial. If we had any HVAC kind of repairs to do or something, that's where that would go, or it would go in other outside services, which also captures some of that. So, special services. Now you're getting into your legal and audit and our MIA insurance premiums. Any recruiting that we need to do, recruiting costs, we always allocate a budget to that. Elections, of course, it goes up again in the 2018, the next year, election year, so that's why you see a change there. And boat launch expense, that's our cost of just operating the boat launch and the operating service agreement we have with the boat launch operator. And then we get into the grants section. And here we have our service agreements. So we have service agreements with the Community Health Initiative. And we have a memorandum of understanding with the it's now called, the Community Health Network. We have a memorandum of understanding as well with them and VHA, and that's that second line there. Okay, so that's just it was a 3-year deal that really didn't get going until 2016, but it's $20,000 a year. So we've received funding from VHA to go towards the CHI, who first reports to us on what they're doing with it. and everything. So, and then the other service agreements with the community association, the chamber, CERTA, and the museum, which is the info center. And then our grants, our annual grants, which are Category A grants. So that's the ones we just went through the review in November. And that budget amount in there right now sort of gets us back to where we were after removing some and bringing some back. So it's a good number again. So, and then the biannual B grants, those are the project grants. So that's your $50,000 budget for there. And then we've got some money allocated for plans. So looking at a OCP refresh in 2016, and some long-term plans is always good to put some money aside for those. So that's things could be even like our agricultural plan, that sort of stuff. Okay. Yeah. So really, that's about it in my area. I just want to mention though, overall, like if you look at the plan from from your strategic plan overall and compare it, and you see, okay, well, how is this budget meeting our strategic plan? So if you look at from a fiscal sustainability point of view, I mean, really you're investing in a lot of infrastructure here, and you're putting funds aside to pay for that infrastructure. So you've got a capital asset replacement reserve, for example. That's $1.5 million over the 5 years. That's going towards that, right? So, and obviously the projects that have been done this year, the town center improvements, the roundabout. Total transfers to our own reserve funds over the 5 years of $2.9 million. So that's significant as well. And then asset management planning and training, which I mentioned some of it in there. We also get a grant for some asset management training. So we have Asset Finder, which is our software that we're using now to track all our assets and do condition assessments on all our assets and figure out, are we putting away enough money? So that sort of stuff. If you also look at it from an excellence in management and governance, there's obviously what I mentioned, the funds that are allocated in the finance area anyway for training, but there's also other areas you'll see, and project management being a key one this year. We're also looking at corporate performance measures are being developed. Budget to actual reporting is going to be improved, and obviously looking at how we do things around here and putting some money towards that too. How can we do things better and more efficiently? From a community planning perspective, the budget, what I mentioned here about the strategic planning, OCP, refresh, long-term plans, that's all going towards your community planning. And then we also are allocating on a planning side for a DCC and a DCC roads and a DCC sewer bylaw review. So that's in the budget as well. And from enhancing community livability, so as you will see as you go through the whole capital plans, you'll see there are a lot of works that are improving the livability in the community from a capital project perspective. Town center, obviously, others that Rob will speak to when he gets up here. $3.8 million spent in 2016 on capital projects. So, and that includes the $1.4 million for the purchase of the potential library site that we just did. And the plan for that, as you see in the plan, and if you look at the first consolidated page of the plan, page 1, you'll see proceeds from borrowing of $1.42 million. Okay, so that's how we plan to finance the property purchase over a 5-year period instead of drawing down the surplus in all at once. Right, so the purchase is down in the capital expenditures number, that 3.8, and if you go to that page, you'll see it's in there. So that is a fiscally, good thing to do it over 5 years instead of drawing down the funds really over the 1 year, which we do have a surplus. Every year we have an accumulated operating surplus. If you look at on our financial statements, you'll see it, and that's it's a good thing to have. And it does provide you for, these one-off type strategic kind of purchases. But it's a good thing, too, to keep it up at a good level. So, and then, of course, on the community livability side, we also have additional investments in policing and fire budgets. So we'll get to that in the protective services presentation, so I think it'll turn it over to Gabriel.
Thanks, Brian.
Go ahead.
The corporate services budget is substantially the same as far as all the line items go. With the majority having just a slight increase or decrease in a number of areas, we actually brought them down. There's really only 3 areas where you've seen a change. The first one that is the salaries, and I want to point out that this is not due to new positions or anything being added. This is the fact that previously the CAO and the corporate services clerk were represented under the finance department. So they're just moved over. That's really only where that comes from. And correspondingly, the benefits came over with them. Under professional development, this has to do with the fact that now we have more people in corporate services than we did previously, as well as the CAO's initiative to bring project management training to the entire organization. So that's under that line. That's why that line has gone up. But the majority are the same or very similar. So I can answer any questions and specifics you have on it.
Rob next. Is Rob next, or is Fire Services?
No, Chief Sorensen is next.
Okay, go ahead, Steve. Come on up. We're at C.
Yeah, good evening. So I'll start out with the emergency program since I look after that as well. And really we don't anticipate any big changes there in the foreseeable future. The only project we're really going to work on that's a little different is we have that second shipping container in the public works yard, so we're going to start building up some supplies in that over time. Under the fire department, general operating, there's not a lot of changes. Some of it's up, some of it's down a little bit based on what Brent did, but there are a few changes that I'll just go through. So obviously there's a difference in the salaries, and that's going to probably reflect in the new collective agreement when it comes out. And based on what all the other fire departments seem to be getting, it's going to be around 2.5% a year if we follow the model. Mm-hmm. And then there's some overtime in there that they've started, the firefighters have started putting in towards, so we've built an overtime budget we never had before. Under professional development, I've asked for more funding there. Most of that will be for officer training to answer the requirements of the playbook for increased skill and knowledge as supervisors. One of the big ones you'll notice, and it's not right away, not till 2018, is under CREST. There's a big jump in the CREST payments, and that's due to the change to the digital radio system and switching over to the 700 megahertz system. So they've started in Greater Victoria, West Shore, and the Peninsula are next year, and then we're the year after. Means all of our radio system has to be replaced. Not reflected in there, though, will be the cost of new pagers, because we'll have to go to digital pagers as well. And Crest is working out pricing for that right now, but we still don't know what that will be. I'm anticipating they're going to be about $750 to $800 a piece for each member. I put in for an increase in the volunteer firefighter honorarium, just to give them some more money. Last year it worked out; they made $1.57 a call, so I think we could maybe give them a little more than that. There's also an increase in the duty officer stipend as it's tied to the IAF agreement, and it's a percentage of that. One of the other ones that you're going to see an increase is the vehicle maintenance costs, and that's due to the fleet is aging, and we're doing more calls, and so it's just as they get older, they need more maintenance. So those are kind of the big highlights under general operating. I don't know if there's any that I've missed that you have questions on, and then I'll just go a bit into capital.
No, we're just going to wait until all the presentations are done.
Okay.
I just want to that you're going to be working with the commission and going over the budget with them. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm meeting with them on Thursday for the budget.
Very good.
Yeah.
And then once that process is completed, then we'll either have fine tuning on this or some adjustments. Correct?
Yeah, this is just the first.
It's just the overview.
Overview, yes.
Okay.
So I'll just highlight some of the capital in there, just so you're aware. One is an increase in the turnout gear budget, and part of that is The gear is not lasting as long as we would like it to. Mostly it's not, and the cost is going up partly because the U.S. dollar right now is making gear pretty expensive. Just for your information, to outfit a volunteer firefighter, if we had nothing used to give them and we just start from scratch, it's about $10,000 now to outfit them, train them, and just get them to the basic skills. There's financing or budgeting in there for small tools and equipment, increase in the foam supply and Absorball, things like that, because we're, again, as we go busier, we use more stuff. And in 2016, we've asked for a replacement of Squad 1, which is the old one-ton pickup truck. It's a 2003 model, and it's just starting to show its age. So the 2017, the big one will be the replacement of all of our SCBA, our self-contained breathing apparatus. They will be at the end of their life. We can't use them once they're the bottles once they're 15 years old. So that's a requirement. We leased the ones that we have now and then bought them out, so that is an option we could look at again possibly. One thing I'll note, there is a fairly good maintenance budget for the SCBA. Once we get the new ones, I would anticipate that would go down. 2018, we're looking at replacing our tanker truck. The tank will be 35 years old, and I've timed it in 2018 because Otter Point Fire Department is planning to buy one at the same time. We're hoping if we were to do the same truck, we would save some money by purchasing the identical unit, and by having matching trucks makes everybody's life a little easier on calls. We're starting to see real metal fatigue in the old tank following the fire last weekend. Another fitting actually failed and the truck sprang another leak. So, request of the firefighters is some renovations to the hose tower to better accommodate some of the training requirements that we go through. The crews are willing to do the work if council would support funding the material to do that. 2019 is the big hit. That's when Engine 3 will need replacement because we'll have only one frontline truck at that time, so we'll be looking at a new truck for one of the stations to replace the 20-year-old one. And then 2020 would be the replacement of Car 1, which would then move down to Sun River to replace the old van. We're thinking that we can recycle the utility vehicles through Sun River, so we're not purchasing a new one down there because they don't have as hard a life as they do as a frontline truck. So those are kind of the capital highlights for the next 5.
Thank you very much. And then we'll have Rob up for Development Services.
And do we want to speak to this?
And then we'll have some general questions from council members once all the presentations are done, just of a general nature, and then we can get into more specifics in our next round of meetings, if that's okay. Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brent touched on a few items within the budget for development services. I just sort of gave a high-level overview and a little bit of detail, but I was leaving it more of a general tone, and then, as you say, maybe more specific questions, and I plan on coming back with more detailed priorities, et cetera, at a later date. But I wanted to start off by saying that following up on the last meeting with regards to drainage infrastructure and those types of things, we're planning for replacement of infrastructure within our budget, hopefully being within the means that we're able to pay for issues such as drainage, roads, sidewalks, parking, and multi-trail usage. We need, as I said, we need to prioritize these, but given the circumstances within the Development Services Group, we are trying to get our handles around the specifics of these prioritizing. It's a hard word to say. But we need to take into consideration while we're doing that the urgency of which they need replacing, and particularly when it comes to the public interest values, particularly when we're talking about sidewalk replacement or sidewalk remediation. We also need to take in the community's wants and wishes with regards to sustainability. When I say that, I'm talking about the downtown core and the opening of the waterfront, dealing with Goodmere Road, Brownsea Boulevard, etc. So the properties can be accessed, so they can be developed and bring economic prosperity to the district, which is something that the OCP has always called for. We need to do a core review of our bylaws and our OCP to make sure our visions are still understandable and achievable within the realm of the budget. And so hopefully we will be undertaking that as the process falls out with regards to the prioritization of these issues. As I said, Brent touched on some of the issues related to the capital expenditure, and without going into detail, I'd be more than happy to answer questions as time goes on here.
Are there any big ticket items that you may want to highlight in the capital portion that are in this?
One of the issues is with regards to. Let me open it up.
I'm speaking 216 and what you see over the next 3 years.
Over the next 3 years, we're talking about remediation of some of our drainage infrastructure. We're talking about $245,000 this year, and at the last meeting, I requested council to consider a perpetual annual budget of $300,000 per year. We're talking about, at this point in time, some priorities that I'm looking at are flooding on Eakin Drive, Atherley Close, Blythewood, Souk River Road, and Gillespie Road. To start, I have more on that list as well, but these are things that we feel are imminent and need to be looked at immediately. Some of the other ones were some sidewalk issues down in the downtown core. Council had resolved, I believe it was last year or the year before, with regards to a sidewalk from Otter Point Road along West Coast Road to the Hope Center. So hopefully we'll be able to get that work done as well. Maybe not this year, but certainly next year. But those are the kind of priorities we need to assess and put in context of, again, priority and the need for the community.
All right. So that finished. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on page 11 all the detailed projects that Rob was speaking to are listed on there. And it says engineering. That's kind of where they all are, and you can see there is money allocated in there for the sidewalk improvements from Otter Point Road to the Hope Center, and then I think it's 2017 would be doing the sidewalk from the Hope Center down to Norden, I guess it was. So.
Right. Well, that's good to hear, because I'm sure you sense the appetite of the council as a whole that if there's money allocated for projects, then get out and spend the money. Otherwise there's a sense of frustration, and that's what's happened over the years. Did you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to also add if you're looking at page 11, for example, you'll see, the first column obviously is the items and the amounts that are planned to be spent, and then the other columns are where the funds come from. Okay, so there's surplus, so that would be if we had already had it in a budget, say last year, and it never got done, we taxed it, so now we're not going to tax it again, obviously, so we're going to draw it from our surplus. And then the next column is the taxes. So when you look at that and you go, okay, well, there's $3.8 million of capital expenditures. Sorry, I should have brought my reading glasses. 550-ish of tax money that's going towards that. So that gives you a sense of, is it all coming from taxes? No, it's not all taxes. It's other monies. It's revenues we get in that get transferred to reserves that can be spent on capital items, that sort of thing. And you'll see the same on all the pages for the 5 years, and you'll see how much taxes are being planned to be spent on those capital projects.
Okay, thank you. So now I'll just turn it over to council members. If you have any general questions in each of the program areas, perhaps you could ask those. And if there's some answers that aren't right in front of the staff right now, and they want to get back to council, then that will happen at our next meeting. So is that agreeable with everybody on that process? Okay, who would like to go first? Kevin?
That's our means we plan on borrowing to pay for financing the project. You'll also see it in 2019. You'll see, as Steve was talking about, the replacement of the engine. So that's, again, we would go to the MFA and get a loan for that. So.
It's a revenue stream.
Yeah, it's if you look at them, like the local government budget is more like a cash. It's how do we fund it and what is the cost? So, yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I just remind members of council to use your mics, because if you don't use them, we can hear you here, but they can't on the webcast.
Sorry, that protects me from that point.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you. So can we ask a few direct questions? Okay. To corporate services, I know we have the special services, the elections in 2018 for $25,000. My recollection in the last election was that didn't include the advertising for the election, so I'm not sure in this case. Because our budget in the corporate services budget for advertising and communications for 2018 remains the same at $30,000. So I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just as a flag, there's something in the back of my mind that the advertising part of the election was there, and it might not have been. And you've answered a couple. Question on the boat launch expense. What I thought we contracted the boat launch. Is that the machine?
You asking for about the just a second?
Well, we're talking about spending $24,000 at the boat launch. We spent $30,000 this year. I'm just not understanding.
Yeah, to the member, that is we have an agreement with an operator that he shares in the revenues down there. We also have the machine we pay for, other little items and that, but the washroom down there, for example, all those things. So those are the expenditures that are in there. And we are looking at that service agreement.
Yeah,
right now.
I thought the service agreement was as we got a cut of what? Like I didn't think we had any.
No, we actually
expenses
bring in
associated.
the revenues ourselves, and then we remit to the operator.
Okay,
So.
all right, thank you. The Sauk Region Community Health Network, the MOU, the $40,000, is that because we didn't pay last year?
It didn't start until the agreements really weren't signed until late December, so they don't kick in until really the 2015 cost is in 2016. So there's kind of two payments.
So I would assume then that does not include the mayor's primary health committee, and I think Mayor Tate was looking for a $5,000 amount, and I don't see that in here, so I don't think that's the same. This is separate.
Yeah, through the chair, I believe I did see something in one of the Category A grants about that.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'll go back and look at that.
Okay, so it could be there just
Yeah.
in the Category A. Okay. And those were answered. And so in the, on page, sorry, I should have been sorry to Mayor and the rest of council. I should have been giving the page numbers, so my apologies. On page 10, the asset replacement reserve, 2017 and 2018 are fairly significant. Is there a particular reason behind that from 192,000?
Yep. Through the chair. So on page 11 and 12, you'll see that reserve being drawn down. The big one being in the engineering area.
Okay.
the drainage, replacement on some drainage that we have
And that's
to
where it's
fix.
going.
So
Okay.
that reserve is for any capital replacement that is needed to be done. Capital includes everything from land, buildings, equipment, and drainage and sewer and all of it.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for putting this together.
You're welcome.
Do any other council members? Yes, Councillor Logans.
Thank you for putting this all together. It actually makes way more sense to me this year than last. One, I guess I have a lot of specific questions that I'll save for later, but in general, I'm assuming the Fire Commission will give us a report before the next meeting, hopefully, or at some point before our budget meeting.
I'll turn to staff to that. I know that their mandate is to have their budget recommendations or deliberations done by the end of the month, by the end of March. So that's what we'd be looking at. But I'll leave it up to staff for perhaps a more accurate update.
Councillor Logan's, the Fire Commission is having their first public budget meeting this Thursday, 6:30. So they're aiming to have their budget for council by the end of the month.
So then, that's fine. Okay. Did you have any other questions? Councillor Parkinson.
I was just going to ask about the under the expenditures on page 1 where it says protective services. That includes the RCMP and the fire department. Is there
That's correct.
Is there anything else included in that for protective?
Well, if you, through the chair, if you go to page 5, and then you'll see the breakout. So there was one area that we haven't spoken to yet, which is the policing.
Right.
And the policing, as you're all aware, we asked for an increase starting in 2016 for one additional member. So that's why the budget's creeping up, and then that full cost going forward is in there. At the time this was prepared, we still haven't got all our 2015 numbers in yet. We're getting some. We just got another one for 25,000. So, and the audits hasn't even started yet, right?
Right.
So these aren't all final numbers. But anyway, the main amount is that contract with the RCMP. So,
Thank you.
and then like Steve also covered off the emergency program. So you got police department, emergency program, and fire department.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, also, I think members should note that on page 23 of the green documents, we established last year a reserve for future policing costs. And so I think we currently have, if I'm correct, is it 43,000? Yeah. And then at the end of this year, that'll grow to 88,000, correct? And so the rationale behind this is that for any unforeseens or any increased costs that are outside of our control, we have an amount of money that we can tap into, because those contracts have adjustments and they may not coincide with our financial year, from what I understand. So is that correct? That's correct. Yeah, okay, because we're dealing with federal budget and our budgets are different. Okay. I don't really have any specifics, but I just want to ask you. Yes?
Really talked on the last page.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, good. All right. That's right. Go ahead. Rob, are you going to speak to that? Or between both of you? Because I know it can be complicated. Go ahead.
I really wasn't prepared to talk about it tonight, but Brent has the figures there.
Yep, thanks. So, there's no real big change in the sewer fund. We collect parcel taxes and the sewer generation charges. There's the repayment to the operating fund. That's that. It's on here. It's called revenue from increase in parcel tax. So that's done and finished with in 2017. We do have in 2016 unusual and sort of significant cost is the centrifuge that needs to be replaced at the plant. So there's a couple of options there, a rebuild or a new one that's more efficient and would last longer with less chance of running out earlier, so that's what we've placed in here is $325,000. And that would be funded by the future reserve for future sewer expenditures. Okay. So that's about it.
I have a question. So would there be a difference in the tax requisition amount on the property purchase if, the adjustment is that do a 5-year borrowing, short-term borrowing on that recent purchase, and then taking revenues from other funds to help offset that cost for the replacement? Would there be a tax benefit or tax adjustment in this budget?
Sorry, are you speaking to the property purchase? Yes. The property purchase, the plan was to immediately fund it just from operating surplus. And that's, you can, like I said, it's maybe for one-time strategic things, that's what your surplus could be used for. We plan to instead, though, do it over a 5-year period through a borrowing. And then it could either be all surplus each year drawn down, like we do with, if you look at page 1 again, you'll see in the funding sources part, you'll see there's always transfers from surplus in that, so then you don't have to tax for those amounts, right? The one amount, third line from the sort of bottom of the funding sources for $152,000. That's that, if you remember the item, the CRD costs that were kind of double counted that one time. So now we're saying, okay, we need to account for that, and that's that. So you could, the library or the property purchase could be the same, done the same way. It can also, the reserve funds that could be used instead and reallocate some of the plan that we've got in here right now. For example, casino fund, which funds capital purchases, land being capital, could be used more, say, to that and offset the amount of surplus you would have to pull in. And then I just rejig some of the monies that are in here right now to casino into other capital funds that would qualify for those. So I'll take a look at that and see if that can be a less of an impact on the surplus. I also would want to point out that right now, as it stands on here, and when this comes forward again, I'll have this presented differently, but the debt service cost in the expenditures, if you go to page called fiscal, well, the debt service costs on page 1, 296 for 2016. If you go to page fiscal services, page 9, at the top there, you'll see that 296, and that's 160 of that is the property purchase for the annual payments for the year. And that, however, should be reflected as an incoming in from surplus. So that will actually reduce the amount of tax that will be needed. So, but I am looking at maybe not just doing it all with surplus, but doing it some with some reserves that could be used.
So the 2.35% could be lower.
Could be lower. Yeah.
Because what is it? 1% equals how much? 65, 66,000.
Yeah.
So okay, well
Okay.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So I'll report back on that next time you see this.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Any members? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, and now we have an opportunity for some public input on this item, and who would like to come forward? Go ahead, Ellen, could you just give us your name and everything for the record? And
For the record.
So now just, before we officially start, we've got our timing system here, and so we're allocating 2 minutes, and that's what we're doing. Yes, for this, but you'll have to remember that you will get another kick at the cat when we have our budget deliberations, and we may end up having 3 special council meetings on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of March to discuss this. And if the procedural bylaw gets completed, then what I envision is that how the agenda items would be broken down, that people could speak at the financial services, the corporate services, the fire services, and the development services. So I think we're striving to get more public input into each of the categories. So if you could you try to keep it to 2 minutes, and with the consent, it would have to be unanimous to extend that time. And we don't have much time because we have to finish at 7 o'clock tonight. No, well, what I'm hoping for is that staff will take some notes and perhaps can get back to you between now and our next meeting to address the questions you've raised. And then, if not, then we could have a discussion at our next meeting. Does that sound fair? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, went off again. Okay. First of all, the money for the purchase, that is taken from where for the land purchase?
Go ahead, Brent.
So our operating surplus is how it initially is paid for immediately, and then it's the plan on page 1. You'll
Yes,
see it's
I got that.
Borrowing from MFA. So instead of paying for it all at once, you pay for it over 5 years.
So you pay for it over 5 years from the operating surplus
And any reserves that can be used.
and any reserves. So you don't really have the $1,420,000 to pay for it outright, right?
We have
we
a
don't.
operating surplus of 2 point. In the district's financial statements, which is kind of a disconnect between the budget, and that gets kind of confusing, but the operating surplus, it's accumulated over, obviously, a number of years. That's where that sits, and that's whenever you see in the budget a transfer from surplus that's coming in from there.
So that you can do that there's a bylaw to support that?
Well, through the chair, we do transfer in from surplus as required for budget needs. So.
Okay. Another question, I forget where this came from, the $75,000 that we're putting in for the bike park, where does that come from? For the bike trail?
Yep, through the chair. 75, so we have a grant from
For 75,
the
yeah.
ministry. Yeah.
And where's the other 75? Because we are paying 75 as well, where does it come from?
Okay, so if you, the 2016 capital plan, page 11, shows that expenditure.
Thank you.
Yep, so the Sioux River Road Bike Trail, and then you'll see where it's being funded from,
So was Sioux River Road,
or where the plan is funded from.
so where's it been budgeted from?
Sorry, I'm
It says
just
it's
trying to see it.
153,000, but it doesn't say where that 75 comes from,
I need some
that we
glasses.
put in.
Sorry.
Gas tax?
No.
Okay.
Gas tax, 78,000?
Yes, that's correct. Gas tax and then other grants, 75.
Okay.
Sorry, my eyes are not good.
Under fire services, I understand that fire services has acquired another vehicle, or one of the vehicles from engineering is now in the fire department. Is that correct? How many vehicles are left in engineering, I guess is the other question. The other side of the equation.
I don't have an answer to that. Rob? And between Rob and Brent?
Chair, through the chair, the question was what vehicles engineering has?
Yes.
We only have one vehicle. Development of Services has 2 vehicles. One vehicle being the GMC pickup, is lived its life. To keep maintaining it would be foolish. We need to secure something newer and not costing so much in maintenance.
And then we also have building inspection?
Building inspection, that vehicle, I haven't heard anything too terrifically wrong about it. We still regularly maintain it, but those are the only two vehicles that we have.
And then bylaw enforcement has a vehicle?
Bylaw enforcement has one vehicle as well, but that falls under corporate services, so I can't really address that.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Okay. A question also is under emergency program. Can we, just a question that's been asked before, why don't we join with Juan Fuca search and rescue for search and rescue? That's something putting maybe to the fire commission.
Right. So I hope you would ask that question at that meeting?
Yes, I will. There's too many questions to ask here. Sorry. Oh, a cost for the pump at Bella Vista. I don't see that in the budget, the repairs.
We don't have the bill yet.
You don't have the bill yet? Okay.
No.
We have, sorry, through the chair, we have tried to put a bit of an estimate in there but again, without having the bill, we don't really know what we're looking at quite yet.
Okay. Well, if we can find out about the trucks, because I see the truck replacements with the fire trucks for the replacements, and that one truck I believe is now a fire vehicle. I believe it's repainted to be a fire vehicle. So
my suggestion, I think, when the commission and the staff do their budget overview, then the commission is also going to be doing an overview on the capital portion of the budget. So you'd probably have a lot better opportunity there and more time to get to the details on that.
Another question under revenues, why are the proceeds from borrowing, why is that in 2016 that's on page, got a hole punched in there, 10. Page 10. Why is that under proceeds from borrowing? Don't understand. With the revenues?
Mm-hmm. Those are your funding, basically the funding sources, that's all. And it carries forward to the front page. So that's the source of funds.
The source of funds
Yes.
is borrowing from MFA.
Yes.
At what percentage?
Because it's a short-term loan, so it's a variable rate. They're currently, I believe, 1.35. They could, but it'll change. But I've estimated, an amount a little more conservative than that.
So Ellen,
Okay.
I don't mean to cut you
No,
off. It's just
I
that,
understand. You've got time.
we have
Yes.
5 minutes
And
left.
there's other people.
And there may be some other
Yes.
people who want to ask
Fine.
some general questions, if
Fair
that's
enough.
okay, right?
Yep, I'm okay.
And then you will get an opportunity at our next set of meetings.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to come forward and ask some questions? Okay, hearing none, then what I'll do is I'll call for a motion to adjourn. And could I get that motion? Got a seconder? It's moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. And we will start sitting in 5 minutes as council for our next items. And just to give people that brief overview before we do close, what I'm hoping that council would consider at our council meeting, that we have special council meetings on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd to just deal with the more detailed discussions around the budget. And so, I'd really appreciate if council could mark that out in your agendas so that we could get this process completed. Okay? Thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.